Welcome to For the Love of Books, a podcast by CultureNL Libraries.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the CultureNL Libraries podcast For the Love of Books. My name is Chris Wilson and I'm the e-services librarian for CultureNL. And what I want to do is welcome you to an episode which is going to be all about our online book club on Facebook, which has been running now for just about 2 years now, I think it is. And what I was going to do was run through what we have read this year. So this episode is going to be called A Year in Reading. And so this has been a funny year for everyone. We can't kind of not touch on that a little bit. And if you can think back to January when everything was normal, can you remember what it was like when it was normal? Our first read of the year was Elizabeth is Missing by Emma Healey. And I think that's quite a well-known book now. It's based on a character called Maud, who is living with dementia, and she thinks that her best friend has gone missing. It's a lovely little read, and our book club really enjoyed it. It was made into a TV show for the BBC, I think, as well, around about the same time as what we read it. It's a fantastic little read, and it's kind of a bit of a mystery as it's going on. Maud's trying to kind of investigate what's happened to her friend, and nobody kind of really takes her too seriously because she does have dementia, and there's kind of a lot of kind of things happening in the background and things like that. So it's a really interesting little read. We would definitely recommend you have a wee look at that if you haven't read it already. Like I say, it has been out for a while, so a lot of people have read it, but it's definitely a fantastic read. Very much worth a look if you haven't already. In February, we decided to have a kind of tie-in with our Love Life, Love Libraries event that we were running. And so we kind of focused on a health title for that. And the health title that we looked at was Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Hague. It's a kind of self-help book in a way. It's a kind of It's Matt's kind of own story about his battles with mental health issues and things like that. And I really like Matt Hague's books. He writes both non-fiction and fiction books, and I have yet to read one that I have been disappointed with. And this was no different. I think this was kind of probably what he's best known for at that point. However, he has subsequently released The Midnight Library, which has done extremely well. So probably that might be kind of what people know him best for now. But Reasons to Stay Alive, it's a lovely way to kind of write about it. It can goes chapter by chapter, little kind of insights into his ways of thinking. It's not like a prescription as to how to solve your mental health. It's very much his personal story, but I think people can relate to it very well, and it's very, very well thought after. So it's definitely worth a look if you haven't read that too already. Brilliant book. Definitely worth a look. For March, we decided to take a little dip into mythology. We went with Circa by Madeleine Miller. Circa is a kind of trip into Greek mythology. She is a daughter of one of the Titans, I think it is, and she is outcast for things that happen, and she kind of has to live on her own. But it's a fantastic kind of story, and what I loved about Circa was, I'm not an expert on mythology by any means, but there was little hints to things that I did recognise. Characters came into it and were mentioned briefly and things like that, just names that I recognised from like kind of high school and things. And it was really lovely kind of just have that little kind of hint of something that I recognised as I was reading through the story too. It's a brilliant story, and I would again highly recommend having a look at that if you are into that kind of sort of historical, mythical kind of fiction. If you're kind of into that, it's definitely worth a read as well. So have a wee look at that too. After that, we I think this is the point where we really kind of hit lockdown at this point, and we started to kind of then use the Borrow Box campaign titles as a real focus for our books going forward from that point. And the first one we looked at for April was a book called Sal by Mick Kittson. And it is set in Scotland, in rural Scotland, and the character. And what I loved about this book was that the two main characters in the book, Sal is one, and her little sister, the relationship that they have in this book is fantastic. Basically, there's something terrible happens to them, and they can go sort of on the run, and decide to go and live in the wild on their own, and kind of rural Scotland, and kind of survive in the kind of wild, while things are going on. It's a fantastic story, and it is very much the kind of relationship that she has with her sister that's the driving force behind the story. How they kind of basically do survive in that kind of landscape. It's fantastic, and but it's also got the kind of darker side of what's happened to them in the past and things like that. So it's kind of a very interesting read, and definitely worth a look if you get a chance. And of course, it's set in Scotland, which is always a bonus for any kind of book for our kind of readers. For May, we went back to Matt Hague, but this time it was for a fiction book, and it was his book How to Stop Time. Again, I have to admit I love this book. It features the character Tom Hazard, and the interesting thing about Tom Hazard is that he has lived a long time. He has got a condition that means that for one year of sort of a ordinary person, if you like, he lives 10 years. So he's lived for a long time in comparison to kind of a sort of regular human, if you like. And he, because of that, he's lived through various points in history, and he kind of has to reinvent himself every so often because people start to notice that he's not aging. And so he kind of changes his life, and it's a kind of there's kind of, you see various parts of his life as the story goes on, and you see that he struggles with sort of some of the basic instincts in life, like falling in love. He's had that problem in the past. He's fell in love, but obviously the person he's fallen in love with doesn't age. Does age, and he doesn't. And there's a kind of the problems that arise from that. And so it's a good kind of mystery story as well, because there's a kind of secret society sort of almost that are all of the people who have this condition, and he kind of gets involved with that, but it's maybe not quite so nice as what they make out, and there's a kind of ulterior motive behind some of that as well. So it's definitely, again, a fantastic read to have a look at. Around this at the same time, on a side note, I did read the Midnight Library as well, and that is a fantastic read. Aside from the book club reads, that was a brilliant book, so definitely worth a look. I can happily say that I am a bit of a Matt Hague super fan, I think. For June, we went on to Ambrose Parry's The Way of All Flesh. Again, set in Scotland, because it's set in Edinburgh, and it features a character called Will Raven. He is a medical student, and he goes to work for Dr. Simpson, who actually historically was a real person. And again, one of the things that I loved about this story was that there are little hints to real events in history that Ambrose Parry does touch on. Ambrose Parry is, of course, Chris Brookbyre and his wife, writing as a kind of dual writer, and it's a fantastic story. There is also a sequel to this one as well, which the name escapes me right now, but Google it and you'll find it for sure. And basically, there's a murderer on the loose, and Will Raven kind of finds this out, and they start to kind of investigate it a little bit, and they get involved in the kind of the mystery of it all, and the other character in the book, Sarah, who is Dr. Simpson's housemaid, and the two of them have a great little relationship. There's kind of almost hints of there is hints of kind of a kind of love-hate type thing going on at certain points in it. And they are the kind of main focus of this whole story, and it's great to kind of see their relationship develop, and also how they get drawn into trying to discover who the sort of murderer is that's on the streets of Edinburgh, and how that ultimately it all comes to a conclusion in the very end. And it's got a fantastic ending. I actually really love the ending in this book. It's almost not intentionally, I don't think, but it's almost a hint of humour in it. I think I love the way that it ends, but definitely again, have a look at that. It's a fantastic read. You will fall in love with it for sure. Around July time, we took our online book clubs to not just Facebook, but we also started a Twitter book club, which was mirroring the Facebook club reads. And we were using hashtag Let's Read NL for that. So the next set of books we used on both our Facebook book club and also for the hashtag Let's Read NL as well. And so the first one that we went for with that was Amy Liptrott's The Outrun, which is a non-fiction title. We kind of haven't done too many non-fiction titles with the book club, but this was one we kind of dipped into, and again, it's a kind of memoir of Amy Liptrott. She is from Orkney originally. She moved to London, and she got kind of fell into kind of the problems of sort of alcoholism, and had a few kind of mental health problems and things like that in her life during that. And she moves back to Orkney, and this book is really about her story, about how she fell into that trap of that kind of lifestyle, and also how that affected her mental health, and then moving back to Orkney to get herself kind of back on track and things. And it's the descriptions of Orkney in this book are so vivid. It's a lovely kind of little hints to how the landscape and the kind of isolation of the way of life in Orkney, things like that sort of stuff, is a important book from both points of the kind of mental health aspect of it and the battle with addiction. And also just that beautiful description of Orkney as a place to kind of visit and see. It did win awards as well. It won the Penn Ackerley Prize and things like that too. So it's definitely a very good book to have a look at and check out if you haven't done so already, especially if non-fiction is your thing. That might be kind of worth a look at some point. Now, for August, we moved on to The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefferty, I think her name is. I can never know how to pronounce it. But certainly The Beekeeper of Aleppo is a fantastic book for sure. It's can be quite harrowing at times. It's basically the journey of a couple going from Aleppo to trying to get from there to London, basically as refugees, and the struggle that they have to go through to get there. They have had a very difficult life up to that point, and it doesn't really get any easier for them as they travel from there to London. They have different experiences with kind of smugglers trying to get them across oceans and things like that. The kind of the life that they have to kind of live for a while in their fight to get across to London. And even whenever they manage to kind of start getting there, there's still the kind of struggles of their past, about how that affects them, and how the struggles that they've had kind of really make a big impact on their life, despite the fact that their living conditions do improve. So it can be a hard read at times, but it's definitely quite an important read and very, very interesting as well. So I would say it's a great book to have a look at, and it is kind of filled with courage and filled with hope, and you kind of really root for them to kind of make it there in the very end up, and it's definitely kind of one to have a look at if you're kind of interested in that. Now, for September, we picked a book called Are You Sleeping by Kathleen Barber. I believe this book has actually been made into a TV show as well, on one of the kind of various subscription channels that you can get. And I thought this was a very interesting book because of the premise of it. It's based on a podcast, which is kind of interesting for what we're doing right now. And basically it's the podcast is a podcast about a kind of real life crime, and it brings back to life, if you like, the media foray about what happened for this murder that had been committed, and how that then starts to affect the family that were left behind by the murder. And it's interspersed, so you kind of see the story, and then you see the kind of podcast transcripts, and then there's little hints of various kind of modern life, if you like, with things like there's tweets kind of shown in it, and Reddit posts and things like that sort of stuff that are kind of transcribed in the book as well. And I just liked the way that was kind of a slight different take on how to kind of do this traditional storytelling of a crime story. And it's because people do those kind of things now. There is podcasts out there that do look at kind of real crimes that have happened, and so this kind of is a kind of fictional version of the real podcasts that are actually out there. And it's a really interesting story that kind of develops from that, and it's sort of, it's a kind of, is the real person really behind bars for this crime, and will the podcast host kind of dig up the truth about what's actually happened? So you do have to read it to find out if that's the case. And it was an interesting read, and for any crime fan, I think they'll enjoy that one, and definitely worth a look. Now, for October, we're almost back up to now. We can dipped into a little bit of a dystopian future, which was based in Scotland again. It was a book called My Name is Monster by Katie Healey, and basically, maybe a little bit too true to life at the moment, there was a virus that had a much worse effect than what the coronavirus has had, and has wiped out much of the population. And the main character in the story sort of believes that she's potentially the only human left. But it's a book of two halves, because she does discover that there is somebody else, and so the second half of the book is from the point of view of the other person, and it starts off, the story is very much about the isolation of thinking that you're the only person left, and then the second half of the story is about that kind of developing a relationship whenever you didn't really think there was one to be had anymore, and how the two of them have different points of view about things, and how much they can end up really depending on each other quite heavily, and needing that kind of human interaction with each other. So it is a very good book, and worth a read if dystopian fiction is your thing. So definitely have a wee look at that if you do think that's your kind of thing. For November, which has just obviously ended at this point, we went for a little bit of a thriller, and we went with The Catch by Tm Logan. Now, Tm Logan books have been doing very well on our BorrowBox service, so I was very much looking forward to kind of reading this one. I hadn't read any of his books before, but like I say, they have been very popular on our BorrowBox service, so his titles had caught my eye a little bit, and whenever this became available as one of our always available titles, I thought this is going to be perfect for the book group. I think a lot of people will like this one, and we went for it. And the book is a good page turner, in my opinion. It caught me very early on, and it had me reading all the way through quite kind of consistently. And basically the storyline is that there's a daughter in the story who brings her boyfriend home to meet the family. She's been seeing him for quite a while, but the family have never met him. And so this is the first meeting of the boyfriend and the family. And the dad instantly just thinks there's something wrong about him. He is not telling the truth. He's hiding something. He's just too good to be true. All that kind of stuff. And so what does the dad do about it? He discovers he doesn't have a long time to find out if there is something behind him, and has to kind of help his daughter and make sure that she's not kind of fallen under the spell, if you like, of someone who is not quite the right person for her. So he then begins to investigate more about him. The lengths that he goes to for that are quite incredible, and maybe sometimes a little bit unbelievable, but at the end of the day, it is a crime story. It's a crime thriller story, and so you're allowed a little bit of creative license for that. And he does kind of go through things like private investigators and things like that to kind of find out a little bit more about him, and it's a fantastic thriller. You will enjoy it. The sort of potential baddie, if you like, the boyfriend is a really good character. The dad, I do kind of feel sorry for him as you read it, and because people just don't believe him. The daughter obviously is madly in love with her boyfriend and is kind of like, Dad, you need to give him a chance. The dad's wife, the mum, is also kind of like, you're going to push your daughter away if you don't stop this. And he's like, but I know there's something not right about this and I need to do something about it. So it's very interesting, the kind of how things develop, how it kind of puts strain on his relationships with everybody in his family, and ultimately you find out at the end what happened. So it's definitely a great thriller reader, a thrill read for you if you do kind of like that sort of thing. So that's what we've been reading so far this year, and we have just announced our December title, which is The Curious Heart of Ailsa Ray, and that is by Stephanie Butland, and that has been described as perfect for people who like Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. And The Curious Heart of Ailsa Ray is about the character is learning how to live again, basically. She's just had a heart transplant, which has basically saved her life. And there's various things going on in her life that you think, having went through that, she may can have a new lease of life. But there's various things that are happening with like her relationship with her mum and wanting to find her dad. There's kind of some friends that have kind of come and gone, and then there's also a boy and involved in that as well. And so basically she's having to kind of learn to live again, and there's the kind of story behind that. Haven't read it yet, obviously, myself, so I'm looking forward to that. It's a bit of a kind of nice light-hearted read for December in comparison to something like maybe The Catch or the My Name is Monster. So kind of hoping that'll kind of be a nice little kind of round off for the year and a nice light-hearted one. And the book club have recently kind of taken part in a Book Week Scotland event, which to find what has been our favourite read over the 2 years, and the winner was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. So I'm hoping this one's going to be a bit of a favourite too. We'll have to kind of wait and see, I suppose. But that's kind of all about the group that we've got. I would love for anyone who's interested to come and join the group. If you search on Facebook for CultureNL Libraries book group, you'll find it and you can join. And if you're interested in the Twitter book club, if you just look for the hashtag Let's Read NL, you'll find out more about how to get involved with that as well. And also, obviously, all the information is on the CultureNL website as well, so you can have a look there too. So that's all from me, guys. This is the last episode in the series for the podcast at the moment. We will be back next year with more episodes of the podcast, so do look out for that. As always, you can also leave some feedback on the podcast by using the hashtag FLB podcast or by using the email address librarypodcast@culturenl.co.uk. But that's all from me, guys. I'd just like to throw as well a last little bit of a thanks for all of the authors that were involved in season 2 of the podcast. It was great having you guys on there, and I hope that all the listeners out there have enjoyed it too. So that's all from me, guys. Bye bye for now. Bye bye.